Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 13 of season 3, y'all know the deal. Got to talk to you about a few quick things. First off, shout out to Grind Clothing Co. They are our official merch sponsor. So you can click the link in the description below this video. That link will send you to Grind Clothing Co.'s website, where you can check out a plethora of different design options of our merch. So if you want to rep your favorite Detroit Pistons podcast, Revved Up 906, make sure to go check it out. All kinds of different options, from polos to t-shirts to hats to handbags, all kinds of different options for you to rep Revved Up 906. We'd greatly appreciate if you checked out that link and then also followed Grind Clothing Co. on Instagram. That link is also in the description below. And if you happen to not like long form content as much, but you happen to be tuning into this week's episode, make sure to follow us on Instagram, because we post daily clips, reels, debate topics, reminders to watch the episodes. So make sure to click the link in the description below. That will shoot you to our Instagram. Make sure to follow us if you like to see our reels. And if you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe, because we can post all the content we want or can, but it comes down to you, the people, the listeners, to help spread word about our podcast. And as you subscribe and like the episodes, that helps the YouTube algorithm push us out to more and more people. So please like and subscribe. And we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic today. So make sure to comment below as the episode goes on. We'd love to know your thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns with today's episode. So make sure to comment below. But before we get into today's awesome episode, Ryan, we have to make sure to talk about and give some light and shine on JB Bickerstaff, as he was named February Eastern Conference Coach of the Month. And Ryan, that's a award that a Pistons head coach hasn't gotten since 2008. And I know I've been thrilled with the leadership of JB. And make sure to comment below your thoughts on JB and what he's done so far with the Detroit Pistons. Sorry about that. But under the JB's regime with the coaching staff, it seems like defense and unselfish passing has been like a big part of what he's kind of put into work. But Ryan, what have you taken notice of that JB's doing that is just really turned this Detroit Pistons team around?
He's being himself. And there's not many coaches that are actually true to who they are. Because we saw last year with Monty Williams, he wasn't himself. He really wasn't.
Yeah.
You saw the difference in him in Phoenix and him in Detroit. There was a significant difference. Just his whole aura, as one may say, around him. It's just like when he was in Phoenix, he was more positive. Looked like he actually wanted to be there. But in Detroit, he just never showed it once. And it was pretty obvious that he didn't want to be there. Whereas JB has been, every stop he's wanted to be there. But I think more so now than ever, he really wanted it in Detroit, just because he sees this opportunity and what the potential is around our team, given how young they are, how much potential they have, how certain guys interact with others, like just this, that, and the other thing he is seeing in this team, and therefore is propelling him to be more positive and have a stronger mindset and determination and just everything you want in a coach. He is putting out on full display because he's obviously wanting to be here.
Totally.
And I think that want to be here is what's really propelling this team. Because, and no disrespect to Monty Williams, and then even Dwayne Casey for that matter. Dwayne Casey wanted to be in Detroit, but that roster at that time wasn't built to win. Whereas this team finally is built to win. And, well, built to win is a strong word. Built to win in the sense of where it has been the last couple of years versus where it is now. It's obviously built to win. because usually in years past you'd make trade deadline moves where you're going like, okay, yeah, I can understand Bojan Bogdanovic as an example last year getting moved for the pieces we got because it's like he's by far one of the best players on the team. We're not going to trade Kate away. So like the next man up is going to get traded. Um, and the expectations were this year, even if we weren't going to be where we are right now, and we were going to be towards the bottom half of the league, Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, and Tim Hardaway Jr. most likely all would have been moved on from. But the difference is the philosophy, and the philosophy results in JV Bickerstaff wanting to be here. And I just think that want that he has to be here shows up no matter where you are in that building, as you are a player, a trainer, just anyone in that building recognizes that he wants to be here. And I think just that alone is evident as to why this Pistons team has had such a surgence. Is just that he believes in them and they believe in him and in the direction that he could probably take this team.
What I love about JB especially is that he really takes time to celebrate his players. And I think that goes a long way, especially with younger players that are still trying to find their image, their playing style, their role on their prospective teams. And when JB Bickerstaff, the head honcho in the locker room, is celebrating you and celebrating guys like Ron Holland and Asar Thompson and Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren, that when you're celebrated, you are given a confidence that you may not otherwise have. And Monty Williams didn't strike me as a motivator, as a guy that will celebrate his players. And so I'm glad that JB Bickerstaff has come in and really celebrated this young team. And when they win, to hype them up, when they're losing, to build them up, and when they're winning, but also keeping lowered expectations of, hey, when we are on this winning streak, we need to think about that next game. We can't worry about this win too much. We have to take that next step and worry about the next game. And I think he's done a great job, while also just having defensive schemes that are locking teams down right now, and making sure the guys are making that extra pass. It just goes a long way with a young Pistons team like we have in today, and it's proving to be great in a lot of away wins and home wins. It's absolutely great to see JB Bickerstaff thriving with this Detroit Pistons team, and it's well deserved that he's coach of the month. So congrats, JB Bickerstaff, on that. Let's get into today's topic. And guys, we have an interesting one for you today. I know it may be a little surprising to see today's episode title, but we're going to be talking about if Giannis is interested in being a Detroit Piston. And the reason this came up is because I was watching a clip on the Run It Back podcast with Chandler Parsons, Lou Williams, and a couple others. And Lou Williams was talking very, very highly of Cade Cunningham, and how Cade and the Pistons are playing so well that a veteran power forward superstar like Giannis may just be interested in making the jump to the Pistons in order to taking that next step to winning a championship. Because we do know that, yes, the Detroit Pistons are winning, and winning in a big way compared to last season, but they are probably a few pieces away from that championship form team that we know will have to be an absolute juggernaut to make it out of the Eastern Conference. And maybe a guy like Giannis is that player to get them over the edge. On Sports Illustrated, they had an article talking about Lou Williams' quote on Giannis possibly joining the Detroit Pistons. It starts by saying Cunningham is posted career highs across the board, and his heightened play has resulted in Detroit vying for a playoff spot. As he continues this breakout campaign, Lou Williams praised the Pistons guard on Run It Back Thursday. He stated that Cunningham is a draw in the NBA, and someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo could view him as someone to help him compete for a championship down the line. Quote, Cade is establishing to be one of those guys that's going to help you compete at a high level, Williams said. It might be a guy like Giannis looking like, you know what, I need to go link up with this young guy, and this might push us past and push us forward. At the age of 23, Cunningham has already shown the potential of being an effective all-around player at the NBA level. This season, he is averaging 25.4 points per game, 6.2 rebounds per game, and 9.4 assists. As he gets closer to his prime, he is certainly a player that guys around the league could consider coming to Detroit to pair up with, per Sports Illustrated. Ryan, I know you have to have a lot of thoughts about this, and I think it's obvious that players around the league are taking note of Cade Cunningham. We just saw at USA Summit last season a lot of Bam Adebayo, Jalen Brunson, some of these guys that are known to be on top Eastern Conference teams. We're talking very highly of Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren. And so that was kind of when the mind started to turn and focus on the Pistons and possibly a Giannis coming to Detroit and pushing the Pistons to that next step. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this? Because I know it's kind of out there, but with the Pistons winning, this is kind of where you have to focus your mind because Cade's playing so well.
So to me, and this happens in every single simulation in NBA 2K, whether or not you like it or not, Giannis always ends up as a Detroit Piston, and I have no idea why.
Yeah.
But can I picture him in a Pistons jersey? Yeah, oh yeah, I could easily picture him in a Pistons jersey. Because it's just like you think of all these players and you go like, okay, could they like look good in our
Totally.
team's jerseys? And Giannis is one of those guys that I think he could look good in a Pistons jersey because it's just he's more on the blue collar side of
Totally.
basketball, and Detroit is blue collar, of course. But to me personally, I feel like I don't think it's possible. And the only reason I don't think it's possible is because Milwaukee obviously is on the tail end of success with Giannis. And that's just because once you put in the chips to go all in on building a world-class roster, you go downhill. And this is no disrespect towards Damian Lillard, but the management over there in Milwaukee have made some very poor decisions as of late. You look at what they did to let go of Mike Budenholzer after his brother passed away. Obviously, it was in the playoffs, and that just wasn't a great playoff series for him. And they're like, okay, well, that's it. We're good to go. We don't need to worry about Budenholzer. He's not our coach. But Budenholzer is a good coach. He brought them to where they are because of his philosophy, as we mentioned, in credit to JB Bickerstaff with this team. Coaches have a big impact on an organization. From the moment you enter the gym to the moment you're going home, the coach has some sort of impact on every single player's day or staff's day because of the mindset that he's bringing and the philosophy he's bringing around it. So I think the push out of Budenholzer was not a great decision. Then, of course, Damian Lillard comes to town. And I love Damian Lillard. Big Dame time fan. Because he can shoot. He makes clutch shot after clutch shot after clutch shot. And his story is just, it's really awesome. Because nobody was expecting him out of Weber State to come in and have the career that he's had. But does the pairing of Lillard and Giannis match? Does it mix well? I don't think it does. And I think it's evident to this point because they made the move at the trade deadline to move on from Chris Middleton because they're like, okay, we need somebody younger. We need somebody who's less injury prone, who has more of star potential around their name than Chris Middleton does at the ripe old age of, I believe, 31. And so they move on from Chris Middleton to Washington to get Kyle Kuzma. And I'm sitting there going like, that's a terrible trade. And that's no disrespect to Kyle Kuzma at all, because of course I'm going to rep my Michigan natives and rock with them. Because obviously Michigan is a severely underrated state in terms of talent, and not just basketball, but other sports too. We don't get enough credit for all our athletes. But I think Kyle Kuzma going to the Bucks was a terrible move just because Kuzma's kind of Giannis-esque. And how is that just going to mix well with Giannis, who's pretty much doing his thing already? You're just adding in another Giannis just with a jump shot and not as strong, but can do a little bit other things that Giannis can't do. But I think what the point is, I think what Milwaukee chose to do the last couple of years is what's going to push Giannis out the door, because they're going to get to the point where it's like, okay, like and honestly, the biggest thing to the reason why I probably think this way is because of look at what Dallas did. Nico Harrison is a terrible GM. He moves on from Luka Doncic out of nowhere. Anthony Davis had no idea. Rich Paul had no idea. Luka had no idea. Nobody had any idea at all. And he specifically only talked to the Lakers. When you have a bad GM in charge, things like that happen. And what the moves that the Bucks have been making the last couple of years, even though they absolutely love Giannis, and I don't see anything bad necessarily happening that way, but I could see it where they push him out. And so, do I see him working out on the Pistons then? I, it's hard to say because my mindset is behind what we have going on right now is the perfect recipe for success. Obviously, we are missing the four. We are missing that desperately. We need a four because Duran is awesome, but he needs a Robin to his Batman. And Stu is usually out there in the second rotation. So he's not getting that out of Stu. And Asar Thompson's not really a four. So we don't have a four. Tobias can do his thing sometimes too. But again, he's more of a three than a four. But he's gotten into a four at a later stage of his career just because of how old he is. And he's not as fast and athletic as some of these younger players are. But I think we are missing a four. But is that for Giannis Antetokounmpo? I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because if you look back at any of our successful teams in Pistons history, you go back to the bad boys. You had Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Vinnie Johnson, Bill Laimbeer, like etc. You had that cast. All of them obviously are fantastic players, but Isaiah Thomas was the star of that team. You go to the going to work Pistons. You had Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace. You look at that group. I really think the stars, if you were to go plural, obviously the whole slew of them are stars because almost every single one of them made the All-Star game, which is unheard of. But Chauncey and Ben were the stars of that team. And then you go to where we are now, and you look at the roster. Cade is obviously the star of this team, but who is the second piece to Cade? Because the bad boys had Dumars to help out with Thomas. The going to work had Ben Wallace and Chauncey Billups. We have Cade Cunningham, who is the next man up. And it's a tough call because you could say it's Duran or you could say it's Ivy right now. And honestly, you could even make a case for Asar. Because like we were talking about the other day, if Asar added a three-point shot, my goodness, he would be probably by far one of the most successful young players in the league currently if he added a three-point shot to his game. Because he is out of this world right now. So I don't know if Giannis is necessarily the right piece. I think there is a right piece, but I don't think it's Giannis.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You broke down how, Milwaukee has made some weird additions to their team, yet they're still kind of floating around in the middle of the pack towards the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference. And I think that's just the Giannis effect, right? And then you got Damian Lillard at the point leading the way in the passing game. And I just don't see Giannis going off in the sunset, ending his career in Milwaukee. I see him going somewhere. It's just going to be a matter of what young core is really playing well in the next couple of seasons. I do think the Detroit Pistons are going to be one of those teams. They need a four. I don't necessarily say that he will never be a Piston. I think there's a good shot. It's just a matter if that cap space is there. I wouldn't see Giannis coming to the Pistons in a trade like a Luka Doncic situation and with the Mavericks to the Lakers. I would see it happening in free agency and having to give him a fat check. That adds more issues with, okay, then who you're going to pay when you bring in a guy like Giannis, who's going to want that fat check. So that does bring up issues. But like you said, the four is an issue. Tobias Harris is great. He's filling the role right now, but if the Pistons are going to take that next step, there has to be somebody better in that 4 position. Next season, Tobias is going to be looking at himself coming in the second off the bench in the second rotation, putting up valuable minutes, but he's just not going to cut it when it comes to a game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. He's not going to cut it in the second round versus the Indiana Pacers or the New York Knicks. He's just not going to cut it when you get to those 4, 5, 6 games in a series and trying to push to the next series. I just don't think it's going to work. So, and we're going to talk about pretty soon here some other possible 4 players, power forwards that could play at the 4 for the Detroit Pistons. Is it Giannis? I don't know, but I definitely don't want to exclude it. It sounds fun. It sounds interesting. It sounds like it would make headlines. And plus, if you look at the past, the Detroit Pistons and the Milwaukee Bucks have had so much overlap. It's ridiculous. I mean, even Tobias Harris started his career in Milwaukee. We dealt Chris Middleton to the Bucks. We dealt Brandon Jennings. The list goes on. So many other guys. There's been a lot of overlap there. And I know that Milwaukee's going to try to guard their best to keep Giannis. You know, that's so obvious. He's a generational talent, just bigger than life. But I know that the last couple of off seasons, there's been talk, is Giannis going to go somewhere else? There's a lot of talk of him going to New York. And then they filled that role eventually with Cat Williams dealing Julius Randle. And or I guess I say Cat, Carl Anthony Towns, not Cat Williams, the comedian. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Is it a little out there? Yeah, but I love that Lou Williams is talking about the Pistons and that there's big names being talked about with the Pistons. We have never seen that. The Pistons organization has never had a Giannis bigger than life player. Like, we've had a lot of great stars, but what was the main topic and main theme around the bad boys and going to work is there was no superstar. Yes, they were also, but there were no top 5 players in the NBA at those times on those teams. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's sure fun talking about it. That's for sure. But as of right now, it's all talk. So make sure to comment below what you think. Could you see Giannis in a Detroit Pistons jersey? Could you see the Pistons trying to bank up some cap space, save some money in order to make a move for a player like a Giannis Antetokounmpo? And would Cade work well with him in the pick and roll and dumping the ball off? Obviously, I think Cade could play well alongside anybody. It's more about if Giannis is going to let Cade get his shots off the way, you know, Cade needs to get his 25 points per game. It'll be interesting to see. Kind of before we talk about some players that could fill the 4 spot other than Giannis Antetokounmpo, I want to talk briefly about Lou Williams in the Run It Back podcast. He had those quotes about Giannis possibly looking at the Pistons as a valuable team to go to, but he also said Cunningham is more desired as a teammate than LaMelo Ball. And Ryan, the reason I bring this up is because I get excited when Cade is getting put up against LaMelo Ball, Jalen Brunson, and he's winning the arguments. And it's especially important because in the young NBA side of things, you want Cade Cunningham to be more desirable than a LaMelo Ball, than a Tyrese Halliburton, and these types of names. And it just shows that nationally, he's getting his recognition like we always wanted. And also that he is more valuable in making the Detroit Pistons a attractive team to play for, and especially with Detroit sports just absolutely thriving right now. But Ryan, what do you think when you see Cade put next to guys like LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson, these names, and he is, and the commentators are showing that, hey, he's more valuable than these guys. Maybe you want to go play with him.
Yeah, you look at what the Pistons are building right now, and you look up and down the roster. Outside of Cade, you have a slew of talent.
Totally.
There's not one guy out there where I'm like, okay, he probably shouldn't be on this team. Everybody is good. Like the fact that we're as deep as we are, to where as Sasser really isn't getting as much playing time as he did last year, is saying something. And then even so with like Bobby Clinton as an example, even though he is a 2nd round pick and not getting guaranteed minutes per se. But if you go back to any of the seasons with Monty or Dwayne Casey, etc., our second round pick was more often than not actually getting playing time. Because a good name to mention is like Saban Lee. Saban Lee came in and was getting playing time. And Bobby Clintman would have been in that same situation where a couple of years ago, he would have been getting a lot of playing time. Now, our team is just so deep roster wise that even Marcus Sasser isn't getting the minutes. Um, and so when you look at that and you look at the moves that Langdon has made to bring in certain players, the belief system, as we mentioned about JB Bickerstaff, and you look at some of the guys that they brought in, and I'm just going to bring up Dennis Schroeder as an example because Schroeder has bounced around from team to team to team, and this year he pretty much completed the rainbow in terms of jerseys. And one of the biggest things he said, and one of the first things he said in an interview, was he felt how connected the team was. He felt the togetherness right off the get-go. And to me, that all stems from JB Bickerstaff, that stems from Cade Cunningham, that stems from the entire team. Because to me, it's like if I'm a coach or if I'm a player, I'm going to try my hardest to make wherever I am look desirable. Whether it's the opposing locker room, instead of having some janky locker room, they're actually going to get a decked out locker room. Or maybe it's I'm going to go out there and do my thing, but make sure my guys get their shots in too. And Cade Cunningham is making sure these guys get their shots in too. Like Malik Beasley the other night had 20 plus shots. And honestly, he's almost hitting 17 plus shots a night. And if you go back to years prior, like that would have butted heads with Cade a little bit. Because you go back to last year, even with Bojan Bogdanovic and Cade, Bojan was trying to force his shot, and it was evident because Cade wasn't getting nearly as many shots up. The ball was seemingly ending up in Bojan's hands, even more so than Cade's. And that's all because of the dynamic. And that once that dynamic changed, then the culture hit a reset. This team is finally like, okay, I kind of want to go there. And it all stems, I really think it all stems from JB Bickerstaff. And honestly, what Cade is doing is fantastic, but it stems from what JB Bickerstaff has done and what Trajan Langdon has done. And even Tom Gores, because Gores made the decision, okay, Monty Williams is not my guy. Troy Weaver is not my guy. I need to hit the reset button and I need to do this the right way. And he brought in advisors. He brought in guys that actually know the game of basketball to make these decisions with him. And he brought in Trajan Langdon, and Langdon made the executive call. I don't need a GM. I can just do my thing and be the president of basketball ops. And brings in JB Bickerstaff. And then the mindset that JB Bickerstaff has in Cade is that Cade isn't just an offensive player. He can be a phenomenal defensive player too. And I think that belief system, along with what Cade has done, has made this team a very desirable destination for a lot of players.
So obviously, maybe Giannis coming to the Detroit Pistons is a little far-fetched, but it opens up the topic that, like we mentioned before, their the power forward position for the Detroit Pistons will have to be replaced eventually, more than likely this upcoming off season. And so there are other names other than Giannis to be considered, and not necessarily a four position or a power forward, but Devin Booker has always been in a conversation to come to the Detroit Pistons. Phoenix Suns are kind of struggling here and there. Kevin Durant is a great four position, a veteran that could maybe fill that 3-and-D position for the Detroit Pistons. On the younger side, there's an option like a Jaren Jackson and a Zion Williamson. And then a vet presence while also having the athletic ability that Tobias Harris doesn't have, a Pascal Siakam. These are some names that the Pistons could possibly weigh out to fill that next couple positions for the Detroit Pistons to put them over the edge to be a contending style team. Ryan, as far as those names between Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Jaren Jackson, Zion Williamson, and Pascal Siakam, which jumps off the screen is for you? Which one do you think would be a great option for the Detroit Pistons?
Jaren Jackson Jr., 100%.
Totally.
And that's just because the only way Devin Booker is a Piston is if it doesn't work out with Ivy. And I have a feeling it's going to work out with him because he was already having a monster year before he got injured. And I truly do believe that the way the team is playing right now, when he comes back, they'll be just fine.
Okay.
In regards to Kevin Durant, it's Kevin Durant. Who can't not like him? But
Right.
it just seems like anywhere he goes, it doesn't work besides
Yeah,
the
that's what I was
Warriors.
thinking.
The Thunder, of course, it worked, but he just needed to stay one more year there. He didn't need to jump ship. If he would have stayed one more year, that team would have gotten one more year together under their belt. I think they probably would have won a championship. Um, but ever since the Warriors, he hasn't done much. Obviously, he's done much in the record books, but in terms of winning, he hasn't done much. And so I'd be a little bit on the scared side of things to bring in Kevin Durant just because of winning. I think he can win, but he needs guys around him that are winners. And do we have that right now? We have a lot of winners. But is Durant going to want the ball in his hands a lot? Absolutely. So that takes
Right.
away a little bit of what we have going on right now. Um, Pascal Siakam, I think, could be a great piece, but he's in that mix of Tobias Harris in terms of age. And
Yep.
Pascal can pretty much do exactly what Tobias Harris can do already. So by the time we add him in, it's going to be in the same boat of like Tobias being in the second unit. That's essentially what it's going to be with him. So I think the best one on the list is Jaren Jackson Jr. just because of how young he is still, and Memphis isn't. They're not going to win, honestly. I don't think they'll ever win in our lifetime,
Yeah.
because it just seems like whenever something good happens, something bad happens for them. Because whether it's John Morant getting injured or Desmond Bain getting out or just somebody, something always happens to the Memphis Grizzlies that I just don't think it's going to work. But I think Jaren Jackson Jr. would love to come back to Michigan.
Totally.
And I think he would gel well with Cade and not necessarily take away from the offense because he's all about the glass. He gets to the board, he hits his shot. That's about it. It might take away from Jalen Duren slightly, but I think Jalen Duren needs an elite big man next to him in
Totally.
order for him to even step up his game too. Because Duren can be offense if he wants, but he's more defensive minded. And I think throwing a defensive minded against next to Jaren Jackson Jr., who is a phenomenal defensive player, but more offensive minded, I think good things could happen there.
Well, and what Jaren Jackson offers that we would lose with replacing Tobias Harris is that 3-point shot, the mid range game. Jaren Jackson can hold his own on any given night, whether it's the at scoring at all three levels. And like you said, offensively, you don't necessarily have to get him involved all the time because he's going to get his offensive rebounds, and that's when he can be incentivized to score in the paint. And then with Jalen Duren, I think sometimes he feels pressure to have to get up shots, and that's when we see him forcing the ball up in transition and forcing these kind of arid fadeaway hook shot style shots that it's just not his game. That was Andre Drummond. And so adding a guy like Jaren Jackson, Jalen Duren can take all that pressure away of feeling like he has to get his shots up in order for the cold streaks to shrink up. But now when you add a guy like Jaren Jackson, that pressure to score is taken away because he's going to get he's going to get 15 or more points and also probably average a double double. You never know what that looks like when you have Jalen Duren next to you, but more than likely average a double double. So I think that'd absolutely be great. I like a name like Zion Williamson. Obviously, a lot of drama and injuries kind of coming with him, and I don't love that. That's the one thing I like about Jaren Jackson is not much drama, not many injuries. Same with KD, a lot of drama and injuries. But Zion is kind of cool too because then you have that just defensive juggernaut. But he doesn't have that three ball as much as I'd like our power forward position to have. Just because if you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, for example, you need somebody to guard Evan Mobley and substitute his shots and his offense, and somebody has to match what he's doing in a game. And I don't think Zion Williamson can do that for the Pistons in a playoff series because Ryan, that's what we're talking. Like that's what the main focus is now. It's not like regular season. We have to talk who's going to show up in the playoffs, who's going to help you get game 2, game 3, game 4 in a playoff series. and solidify some wins. We know Cade is going to get you a win in a playoff series, but who's going to step up in the late, close fourth quarter situations that a guy like Jaren Jackson is going to be there for the Detroit Pistons? It's just a matter of getting him on the team. I'd absolutely love seeing Jaren Jackson in a Detroit Pistons jersey. That'd just be absolutely awesome. Make sure to comment below your thoughts on who the Detroit Pistons could add at the power forward position, or maybe other positions that you may see or be interested in. Make sure to comment below. That will do it for episode number 13 of season 3. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys in next week's episode. Peace.